Humans shocked the Galactic Council, refusing all negotiation. The massive space station hung in the darkness like a silver jewel. It was bigger than most moons and filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Inside the main chamber, 12 different alien species sat in a circle. Their seats were made from rare metals and glowing crystals. This was the Galactic Council, and today they would deliver their final message to humanity. Ambassador Vex stood at the center of the chamber. Her body was made of living crystal that changed colors as she spoke. She was from the Altarian Empire, the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Around her sat the other council members. There was Hive Queen Nala, whose insect-like body clicked and buzzed. Counselor Drim floated in a special container because his body was made of gas. 8 other aliens filled the remaining seats, each stranger than the last. At a small table sat one human. Captain Marcus Webb looked ordinary compared to the aliens around him. He wore a simple gray military uniform with no decorations. His hair was turning white and his face showed the lines of someone who had seen many battles. He sat quietly with his hands folded on the table. The chamber was full of noise. Alien voices spoke in dozens of different languages while translation devices worked to make sense of it all. The air smelled strange, mixing the scents of different worlds and different forms of life. Ambassador Vex raised one crystalline arm, and the room fell silent. Her voice echoed through the chamber like music made of glass. We are here today to address the problem of species 7734, known as humans. Marcus did not move. He had expected this day for months. Vex continued speaking. For 300 years, humans have been spreading across the galaxy. They take worlds without asking permission. They build colonies where they do not belong. They refuse to follow the laws that all civilized species must obey. The other council members made sounds of agreement. Some clicked their claws. Others buzzed or hummed. Counselor Drim's gas form swirled faster inside his container. Every species in this galaxy must pay tribute to the council, Vex said. This tribute pays for protection from pirates and hostile aliens. It pays for the peace that allows trade between worlds. Humans have never paid this tribute. Hive Queen Nala's compound eyes focused on Marcus. When she spoke, her voice sounded like 1,000 insects talking at once. Humans multiply too quickly. They spread like a disease across clean worlds. They must be stopped. The other aliens nodded or made similar gestures. Some had tentacles instead of heads. Others had multiple arms or glowing skin. But they all agreed on one thing. Humans were a problem that needed to be solved. Ambassador Vex's crystal body grew brighter as she delivered the council's decision. Species 7734, you will stop all expansion immediately. You will abandon your outer colonies and bring those populations back to your home worlds. You will provide 50% of all your industrial production to the council as tribute. You have 72 standard hours to agree to these terms. She paused and looked directly at Marcus. If you refuse, the council will use military force to make you comply. Our combined fleets have over 2,000 warships. Your entire species has perhaps 50 combat vessels. The choice should be obvious. Marcus stood up slowly. Every alien eye in the chamber focused on him. Some of the smaller species moved backward in their seats. Humans had a reputation for being unpredictable and sometimes violent. We have considered your offer, Marcus said in a calm voice. His words were translated into dozens of languages instantly. Humanity respectfully declines. The translation devices seemed to pause. Even the advanced alien computers had trouble believing what they had heard. The chamber fell completely silent. Not a single click, buzz, or hum could be heard. Ambassador Vex's crystal form flickered like a light with bad wiring. You decline? Perhaps the translation is incorrect. The translation is perfect, Marcus replied. Humanity rejects your authority. We will not pay tribute. We will not abandon our colonies. We will not stop expanding into space. We will continue to live as free beings. Counselor Drim's gas form spun wildly in his container. This is impossible. No species has ever refused the council's demands. Hive Queen Nala's wings began to vibrate, creating a high-pitched whining sound that hurt to hear. You cannot refuse. You are too small, too weak, too primitive. The other council members began talking all at once. Some shouted in anger. Others made threatening gestures with claws or tentacles. A few seemed more confused than angry, as if they could not understand what was happening. Marcus remained calm. He had practiced this moment many times. The decision has been made by the elected representatives of humanity. We will not submit to tyranny no matter how old or powerful it claims to be. Ambassador Vex's crystal body turned deep red, the color of anger in her species. You doom your entire species with this foolishness. Our fleets will turn your worlds to ash. Your children will curse your name, perhaps Marcus said. He walked toward the chamber's exit. But they will curse it as free beings, not as slaves. As Marcus reached the door, alarms began to sound throughout the space station. Red lights flashed and automated voices spoke in multiple languages. The Council's military forces were being activated. Orders were being sent to fleets throughout the galaxy. The largest military force in galactic history was being assembled to crush one small, stubborn species. Marcus stepped into the corridor outside the chamber. The station was now full of running aliens and flashing lights. Military officers shouted orders while diplomats tried to contact their home worlds. Everyone knew that a war was about to begin, but Marcus was not worried. He walked calmly to the docking bay where his ship was waiting. The other humans on board looked nervous, but they trusted their captain. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing they might not return home. "Sir," said Lieutenant Torres, a young officer with worried eyes, "the Council is mobilizing everything they have. 2,000 ships are moving toward human space." Marcus sat down in his captain's chair and activated the ship's communication system. "Send the signal," he ordered. Torres pressed a series of buttons on her control panel. A simple message was transmitted on a frequency that only human ships could receive. The message contained just 2 words: Operation Defiance. Across the galaxy, human ships that had been hiding in dark space between the stars received the signal. Ships that the Council did not know existed. Ships that had been built in secret shipyards far from any alien eyes. Ships equipped with technology that would soon shock the galaxy. As Marcus's small vessel left the Council station, he looked back at the massive structure one last time. Inside, 12 species were planning humanity's destruction. They believed they knew everything about human military strength. They believed humans were weak and helpless. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The real war was about to begin, and humanity had been preparing for this day much longer than anyone suspected. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the smallest species could surprise everyone. The first phase of humanity's plan was complete. Now came the hard part. Humans shocked the Galactic Council, refusing all negotiation. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the stars shift and bend as her fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Around her, 300 human warships appeared from the darkness like ghosts becoming real. The ships were sleek and black, covered in armor that seemed to drink in the light from nearby stars. "Fleet deployment complete, Admiral," reported Commander Blake from his position at the tactical station. "All ships are in position around the Council fortress." Elena nodded as she looked at the massive alien structure hanging in space before them. The Council's main military station was larger than Earth's moon. Its surface was covered with weapons platforms and shield generators. Thousands of smaller ships moved around it like insects around a hive. "They still think we only have 50 ships, Elena said with a small smile. "Intelligence reports suggest they are quite surprised." On the Council station, alarms were screaming through every corridor. In the main command center, Councillor Thane stared at his sensor displays with growing horror. His reptilian face showed scales that had turned pale with fear. "Impossible," Thane hissed through his forked tongue. "Our spies reported the humans had minimal military forces." "Where did these ships come from?" Ambassador Vex materialized next to him, her crystal body pulsing with angry red light. "It does not matter how many ships they have. Call in the full Council fleet. Every species will contribute their warships. We will destroy them all." Across the galaxy, the call went out to every member of the Galactic Council, from the gas giant shipyards of the Drim Collective to the asteroid fortresses of the Stonefolk. Thousands of warships began moving toward human space. The largest military force in galactic history was being assembled. On the human flagship, Elena received a message from Captain Webb, who had just returned from his meeting with the Council. His face appeared on her communication screen, looking tired but determined. "Elena, they are bringing everything they have. 2,000 ships from 12 different species. Are you sure our new weapons will work?" Elena looked at the readouts from her ship's experimental systems. For the past 5 years, human scientists had been working on projects that seemed impossible. They had found strange artifacts buried deep in Earth's oceans. technology left behind by an ancient race. Human engineers had combined these discoveries with their own innovations to create weapons that defied known physics. Marcus, remember when we first split the atom? Sometimes the newest player changes all the rules. The human fleet spread out in a perfect formation around the council station. Each ship was small compared to the massive alien vessels, but they moved with a precision that impressed even their enemies. Human pilots had trained for years in secret, preparing for this moment. Dr. James Holloway worked frantically in the research lab aboard Elena's flagship. He was the scientist responsible for humanity's most important secret weapon. Around him, banks of computers calculated gravitational fields and quantum mechanics equations that would have been impossible just 10 years ago. Gravitational manipulation drives are online, he reported to the bridge. All ships report ready to activate defensive systems. The Council's first attack began exactly as expected. Massive alien battleships opened fire with plasma cannons that could melt asteroids. Antimatter torpedoes streaked through space, each one carrying enough power to destroy a city. Energy beams that glowed like captured stars reached out toward the human ships, but something impossible happened. The weapons simply curved around the human vessels like water flowing around rocks. Plasma bolts that should have vaporized entire ships instead bent away and flew harmlessly into empty space. Torpedoes changed direction in mid-flight and exploded far from their targets. What is happening? Hive Queen Nala demanded from her bioship. Her compound eyes tracked the impossible trajectories on her organic sensors. Our weapons are missing targets that cannot dodge. Captain Krell of the Altarian flagship watched his tactical display with growing confusion. All weapons ineffective. Their ships seem to be bending space itself around them. Our targeting computers cannot lock onto them. The humans had done something that no other species thought possible. They had learned to manipulate gravity on a small scale, creating tiny black holes around each ship. These gravitational fields bent space and time, making the ships impossible to hit with conventional weapons. But humanity's response was even more shocking than their defense. Instead of firing back with similar energy weapons, the human ships launched what looked like simple metal balls. Thousands of them, each about the size of a person's head, drifted slowly toward the Council fleet. The alien commanders laughed at what they saw. After displaying such advanced defensive technology, the humans were using primitive kinetic weapons that moved slower than ancient chemical rockets. They mock us with toys, sneered Counselor Drim as his gas form swirled with contempt. These metal spheres cannot possibly harm our armor. The spheres reached the Council fleet and something extraordinary happened. Instead of exploding with fire or shrapnel, each sphere created a tiny rip in space-time itself. Controlled wormholes opened around every Council ship, creating temporary tunnels through the fabric of reality. In an instant, the massive Council fleet found itself scattered across dozens of star systems. Ships that had been flying in formation next to each other were suddenly separated by light years of empty space. The greatest military force in galactic history had been split up and scattered like leaves in a windstorm. Admiral Elena activated her fleet-wide communication system. Her voice reached every scattered Council ship simultaneously through quantum-entangled transmitters. Council forces, you are now separated and vulnerable. Your fleet has been displaced across multiple star systems. However, we want you to notice something important. We have not destroyed a single ship. We have not killed a single person. This demonstration was designed to show you that humanity possesses capabilities you do not understand. The truth of her words hit the alien commanders like a physical blow. Despite their overwhelming technological superiority, the humans had chosen not to use lethal force. Every ship displacement had been calculated to avoid civilian populations. Military vessels had been separated from supply ships to prevent accidents. The humans had defeated the Council fleet without spilling a drop of blood. We offer you one opportunity to withdraw your forces and reconsider your demands, Elena continued. We do not wish to fight you, but we will not submit to tyranny. Across multiple star systems, Council commanders tried to regroup their scattered forces, but their communication systems were struggling to coordinate across such vast distances. Ships that had been part of coordinated battle groups were now isolated and confused. On his displaced command ship, Counselor Thane activated long-range sensors to try to locate the rest of his fleet. What he saw on the sensor displays made his reptilian blood run cold. Massive structures were emerging from the dark space between galaxies. They were enormous, larger than entire planets, and they were moving toward the galactic rim. The sensor readings showed thousands of them, each one radiating energy signatures that dwarfed anything in the Council's arsenal. "By all the stars," Thane whispered. "What are those things?" The answer came from Admiral Elena's next transmission, broadcast to every ship in the scattered Council fleet. "What you are seeing is humanity's true fleet. The 300 ships you fought were just our forward scouts. Our real forces have been waiting in the void between galaxies for this moment." As the massive structures drew closer, their shapes became clear. They were ships, but ships built on a scale that seemed impossible. Each one was the size of a moon, covered in weapons and defensive systems that used technology no Council species had ever seen. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had allies no one suspected, and resources that had been hidden since before recorded history began. Humans shocked the Galactic Council, refusing all negotiation. The battle that should have lasted hours was over in minutes. The Council's greatest military leaders stared at their tactical displays in complete confusion. Everything they knew about warfare had just become useless. Dr. James Holloway watched from his laboratory aboard the human flagship as their gravitational manipulation systems performed beyond even his wildest calculations. Around each human ship, controlled micro-black holes bent space and time itself. The laws of physics that governed normal combat simply did not apply anymore. Gravitational field stability at 98%, he reported to Admiral Elena. All systems performing within acceptable parameters. The aliens cannot touch us. The Council's weapons fire continued to curve harmlessly around the human vessels. Plasma cannons that could cut through planet-sized asteroids simply followed the curved spacetime around each ship and flew off into empty void. Antimatter torpedoes that carried the power of small suns changed direction and exploded, far from their intended targets. Captain Krell of the Altarian flagship pounded, his fists against his command console in frustration. His crew of trained warriors looked at him with growing fear. They had never seen their captain lose control like this. "All weapons are useless," Krell roared. "Their ships exist inside bubbles of twisted space. How can we fight enemies we cannot even hit?" On her bioship, Hive Queen Nala tried a different approach. Her vessel was grown rather than built, using living tissue that could adapt to new situations. She commanded her ship to fire acid pods that could eat through any known armor. The organic projectiles approached the nearest human ship and simply disappeared. The gravitational fields around the human vessel created such strong space-time distortions that the acid pods were crushed into quantum foam before they could make contact. "Even our biological weapons fail." Nala clicked in her insect language. "These humans have made themselves untouchable." But the Council's shock turned to complete bewilderment when humanity finally returned fire. Instead of using similar energy weapons or gravitational attacks, the human ships launched thousands of simple metal spheres. Each sphere was roughly the size of a large melon and moved so slowly that even civilian ships could have avoided them. The alien commanders could not understand what they were seeing. These primitive kinetic weapons moved slower than ancient chemical rockets. They carried no explosive warheads and generated no energy signatures. They looked like something a primitive species might use before discovering basic energy weapons. Counselor Drim's gaseous form swirled with contempt inside his containment vessel. "After demonstrating such advanced defensive technology, they insult us with these toys. Metal balls that drift through space like debris." The Council fleet's point defense systems could have easily destroyed the approaching spheres, but the alien commanders were curious about what the humans thought these primitive weapons could accomplish. Some wondered if it was a cultural gesture, like throwing rocks to show defiance. The first sphere reached an Altarian cruiser and something extraordinary happened. Instead of bouncing off the armored hull or creating a small impact crater, the sphere generated a controlled gravitational pulse. A temporary wormhole opened in spacetime, no larger than a doorway but perfectly stable. The Altarian cruiser suddenly found itself light years away from the battle, floating alone in an empty star system. The crew looked around in shock as they realized they were no longer anywhere near their fleet. "What happened?" demanded the ship's captain. "Where is everyone else?" The same thing was happening throughout the Council fleet. Each metal sphere created its own small wormhole, precisely calculated to transport individual ships to different locations. Within minutes, the largest military force in galactic history was scattered across dozens of star systems. Admiral Elena Rodriguez smiled as she watched her fleet's tactical display. Every council ship was now isolated and confused, separated from their command structure and support vessels. But more importantly, not a single alien had been harmed. "Status report," Elena commanded. Commander Blake checked his sensors carefully before responding. "All Council military vessels have been successfully displaced." 0 casualties reported. Civilian ships and space stations remain in their original positions undamaged. The precision of the operation was staggering. Human computers had calculated the exact position and velocity of every ship in the Council fleet, then created wormholes that would separate military vessels from non-combatants. Supply ships full of families were left safely behind while warships found themselves alone in distant star systems. Elena activated her communication system to address the scattered Council fleet. Her message was transmitted simultaneously to every displaced ship through quantum-entangled transmitters that ignored the vast distances between them. "Council forces, you have just experienced a demonstration of humanity's spatial manipulation technology. Your fleets are now separated and vulnerable, but we want you to understand something crucial. We have not fired a single lethal shot. No one has been injured or killed. Your military vessels have been displaced, but your civilian populations remain safe." The message reached Captain Krell as his ship drifted alone in an unfamiliar star system. He looked around his bridge at crew members who seemed as confused as he was. Despite being the enemy, the humans had been careful not to separate him from his life support systems or damage his ship's ability to sustain his crew. "This is impossible," Krell muttered. "No species has ever developed this level of spatial manipulation technology. It should not exist," Elena's transmission continued. "We offer you this one opportunity to withdraw your forces and reconsider your demands. We do not wish to fight you, but we will not submit to tyranny. Humanity chooses to live free." Counselor Thane tried to coordinate a response from his displaced command ship, but the Council's communication systems were not designed to handle fleets scattered across multiple star systems. His long-range sensors were picking up energy readings that made his reptilian scales twitch with fear. "All ships report your positions," Thane broadcast on emergency frequencies. "We must regroup and assess this new threat." But as the scattered ships began reporting their locations, Thane's sensors detected something that sent ice through his veins. Massive structures were emerging from the dark void between galaxies, moving toward the outer rim of known space. These were not ships in any traditional sense. They were artificial constructs the size of small moons, covered in what looked like advanced technology, but built with materials that did not appear on any periodic table. Energy readings from these structures showed power outputs that dwarfed entire solar systems. "By all the ancient gods," Thane whispered, as his sensors counted the approaching objects. "There are thousands of them." The truth hit the Council commanders like a physical blow. The 300 ships they had just fought were not humanity's main fleet. They were scouts, advance units sent to test Council capabilities, while the real human forces waited in the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge. Hive Queen. Nala's compound eyes focused on her, bioship's organic sensors, as they detected the approaching megastructures. "These energy signatures, they are unlike anything in our databases. The technology readings suggest systems we do not understand." Admiral Elena's voice came through the quantum communicators one final time. "What you are seeing is humanity's true fleet. We have been preparing for this encounter for much longer than you realize. Your choice now is simple. Withdraw your forces and open negotiations for a peaceful coexistence, or discover what happens when humanity stops holding back." As the massive structures drew closer, their true scale became apparent. Each one was not just a ship, but an entire mobile civilization, carrying cities and populations that had been hidden in the void between galaxies for reasons no Council species understood. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had allies and resources that predated every known civilization, and the balance of power was shifting in ways that would change the course of history forever. The humans shocked the Galactic Council, refusing all negotiation. The massive structures that emerged from the void between galaxies were not what anyone expected. As they drew closer to the galactic rim, Their true nature became clear to the scattered council forces. These were not weapons of war, but something far more ancient and mysterious. Professor Diana Walsh stood aboard the human command ship, studying readings from instruments that had been silent for 6,000 years. She was humanity's leading expert on xenoarchaeology, the study of ancient alien civilizations. What she was seeing on her displays challenged everything she thought she knew about galactic history. "Admiral, these structures are responding to signals from our ships," Diana reported to Elena Rodriguez. "They are not human constructions. They are installations left behind by a species that vanished before any current civilization achieved spaceflight." The approaching megastructures were the size of small moons, but their composition defied analysis. They seemed to be built from materials that existed partially in normal space, and partially in dimensions that human science could barely detect. Massive crystalline formations covered their surfaces, pulsing with energy that seemed to bend light around them. Commander Ash, the human officer responsible for coordinating with these ancient systems, watched as dormant technologies came online after millennia of sleep. "The computer systems are awakening. They recognize something about our genetic markers and technological development. They have been waiting for us." On his displaced command ship, Counselor Thane watched his sensors with growing horror as the ancient installations activated. His reptilian features showed fear that went beyond simple military concern. These energy readings triggered ancestral memories buried deep in his species' collective unconscious. "Access the classified archives," Thane ordered his crew. "Search for any references to the architects or the ancient builders. There are records we buried long ago." As his crew worked frantically through data files that had been sealed for thousands of years, the truth began to emerge. The Galactic Council was not the first organization to rule this part of space. Long before any current species had achieved interstellar flight, another civilization had established a network of installations throughout the galaxy and beyond. Ambassador Vex materialized on Thane's command deck, her crystal body flickering with confusion. "I have accessed the oldest records of my people. We remember them now. The architects came to us when we were young, barely able to travel between the moons of our home system. They offered us knowledge and technology. The ancient records told a story that the Council had deliberately forgotten. 6,000 years ago, the architects had visited every emerging civilization in the galaxy. They had shared advanced technologies and offered guidance, but they had also established what they called the test. The test was supposed to determine which species had evolved beyond the need for domination and conquest," Thane read from the classified files. "Those who passed would inherit a network of ancient technologies and join a galactic community based on cooperation. Those who failed, the records ended there, but the implication was clear. The Council had failed the test long ago." On the human flagship, Professor Walsh received transmissions from the ancient installations that were now fully active. The messages came not in any known language, but as pure mathematical concepts that somehow conveyed complex ideas directly to her mind. "They are calling themselves the Architect Collective," Walsh reported. "They seeded various worlds throughout the galaxy with genetic markers and technological artifacts, hoping that eventually, worthy successors would emerge. Humanity has been guided by their influence for our entire evolutionary history." The truth was staggering. The strange artifacts that human scientists had found in Earth's deepest ocean trenches were not random alien technology. They were carefully placed tools left by the architects to help humanity develop along a specific path. Human innovations in gravitational manipulation and space-time technology were not entirely human in origin. The architects did not just leave us technology, Commander Ash reported as more ancient systems came online. They preserved entire civilizations that once stood against galactic tyranny. From the massive installations, smaller vessels began emerging. These ships were built with the same impossible materials as their mother structures, but they carried something even more remarkable. Inside each vessel were the preserved consciousnesses of species that had been extinct for thousands of years. The Velcori had been a peaceful race of philosophers who had refused to submit to early council authority. The hegemony had wiped them out completely, but the architects had saved their minds and knowledge. The Star Weavers had been artists and scientists who created living sculptures from stellar plasma. They too had been destroyed for refusing to pay tribute, but their consciousness survived in architect storage. Dozens of extinct species began communicating with the human fleet, sharing knowledge and technologies that had been lost for millennia. They brought with them the memories of civilizations that had chosen freedom over safety, cooperation over conquest. Hive Queen Nala received these transmissions on her bioship and felt something her species had not experienced in centuries: shame. Her genetic memory contained traces of the old stories, legends that told of the lost peoples who had vanished when her ancestors joined the Council. We were told they were primitive species that could not adapt to galactic civilization. Nala clicked in her complex insect language. But they were not primitive. They were free. The Architect Collective began broadcasting its assessment to every ship in the galaxy, both Council and human. The message was transmitted in pure mathematical concepts that every intelligent species could understand, regardless of their communication methods. Current galactic governance system evaluated. Verdict: incompatible with continued existence. The Council model based on tribute and domination has created stagnation and suppression of potential. Initiating species-wide evaluation protocols. Throughout the galaxy, ancient installations that had been dormant for thousands of years suddenly came online. On every Council world, scanning beams began analyzing planetary populations, technological development, and social structures. The architects were conducting a comprehensive review of every civilization in known space. Admiral Elena Rodriguez realized that humanity had not just refused to submit to the Council. They had accidentally triggered a galactic judgment that had been waiting for 6 millennia to occur. Professor Walsh, what exactly are these evaluation protocols? Elena asked. Diana studied the data streams flowing from the ancient installations. They appear to be measuring each civilization's capacity for growth, cooperation, and peaceful development. Species that score too low on these measurements will find their ability to project power beyond their home systems mysteriously limited. The implications were staggering. The architects had the power to contain aggressive species while allowing peaceful ones to flourish. They could reshape galactic civilization without violence, simply by limiting the expansion capabilities of tyrannical governments. Councillor Drim's gaseous form spun frantically inside his containment vessel as he processed the architect transmissions. This cannot be happening. The Council has ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years. We brought order to chaos. But the architect evaluation was already underway. On Altarian worlds, the military shipyards that produced the Council's most powerful warships began experiencing mysterious system failures. On Hive Queen Nala's home planets, the breeding facilities that created warrior castes found that their genetic manipulation equipment would no longer function. The species that had built their civilizations on conquest and domination were discovering that their tools of oppression were being systematically disabled. Meanwhile, the minor species that had been suppressed by the Council found new technologies appearing in their databases, gifts from the Awakening Architect Network. Humanity's role in this galactic transformation was becoming clear. They had not conquered the Council through superior firepower. They had served as the catalyst for an ancient judgment system that would reshape civilization itself. The age of empires built on tribute and fear was ending. The age of cooperation and mutual growth was about to begin, whether the old powers wanted it or not. Humans shocked the Galactic Council, refusing all negotiation. The final judgment took place in a realm that existed between dimensions, where space and time flowed like water and thoughts became visible as geometric patterns. Captain Marcus Webb found himself standing in a vast crystalline chamber, alongside representatives from every species in the galaxy. The chamber was not built from any material that existed in normal space. Its walls seemed to be made from crystallized mathematics, surfaces that showed complex equations flowing like living things. The floor beneath their feet was transparent, revealing infinite depths that contained the memories of civilizations spanning millions of years. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the chamber. There were the 12 council members looking small and frightened without their massive fleets to back them up. But there were also delegates from minor species that the council had suppressed or ignored for centuries. Tiny insect-like beings that had been classified as non-intelligent, gas creatures that had been considered too primitive for council membership, rock-based life forms that had been dismissed as geological formations. At the center of the chamber, The architect collective manifested as a shifting geometric pattern that somehow conveyed both immense age and deep sadness. When it spoke, its voice resonated through dimensions that most species could not even perceive. The test was established 6,000 years ago with a simple purpose, the architect consciousness explained. To determine which species in this galaxy had evolved beyond the need to dominate others. Most civilizations fail this test by seeking to conquer when given power. Some fail by accepting subjugation without resistance, but occasionally a species chooses a different path. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stepped forward to represent humanity before this cosmic tribunal. Around her, the other human delegates looked calm despite being in the presence of technology that could reshape reality itself. "We did not seek to replace the Council's tyranny with our own," Elena said. "When we gained superior military power, we used it to scatter their fleets safely rather than destroy them. When we could have conquered their worlds, we chose instead to awaken this ancient judgment system. We believe that true strength lies not in the ability to dominate, but in the wisdom to know when such power should not be used." The revelation that followed shocked every species present. Humanity had not been simply expanding randomly through the galaxy over the past 3 centuries. Every human colony, every trade route, every diplomatic mission had been part of a careful plan that had been developing for decades. Professor Diana Walsh activated a holographic display that showed the true scope of humanity's activities. Our colonization efforts were never about territorial expansion. We were establishing supply networks and safe havens for oppressed civilizations. Our traders were secretly sharing advanced technologies with minor species. Our diplomats were building underground networks of cooperation that spanned the galaxy. The display showed hundreds of minor civilizations that had been quietly receiving human assistance for years. Species that the Council had considered too primitive to notice had been developing advanced technologies with human help. Worlds that were supposed to be barren were secretly harboring refugee populations from Council persecution. The Council's expansion problem was never about territory, Captain Webb explained. It was about liberation. Every time they tried to tighten their control over a system, they found that the local populations had mysteriously acquired the resources and knowledge to resist. Ambassador Vex's crystalline form flickered with something that might have been respect. For the first time in her species' history, she spoke without arrogance or condescension. "You mean that every human we encountered was part of this network? Every trade negotiation, every colonial survey, every diplomatic contact was secretly undermining our authority?" Elena nodded. "We learned early in our spacefaring history that the Council system was built on the premise that weaker species would remain weak. We decided to prove that premise wrong by helping every species we encountered to reach their full potential." The Architect Collective processed this information, comparing it to the behavior patterns of thousands of species they had evaluated over millions of years. The geometric patterns that formed their consciousness began to glow with what could only be described as approval. "The test has been passed," the architects announced. "Humanity demonstrates the key characteristic we have sought, the understanding that true leadership means empowering others, rather than controlling them." But the judgment was not complete. The architects had evaluated every species in the galaxy during the past several days, and their verdict would reshape civilization itself. "The current Council system will be dissolved," the architects declared. "Those species that have based their power on domination will find their ability to project force beyond their home systems permanently limited. Those that choose cooperation will discover new technologies and opportunities opening to them." The chamber filled with displays showing the transformation already taking place throughout the galaxy. On Council worlds, military production facilities were shutting down permanently. Weapon systems that had been used to threaten minor species were decomposing at the molecular level. The vast fleets that had enforced Council authority for millennia were being systematically disabled. But this was not destruction. It was transformation. The same energy that was dismantling weapons of oppression was creating new technologies for peaceful development. Medical research facilities were appearing on worlds that had never been able to afford advanced healthcare. Agricultural systems were being upgraded on planets that had struggled with food production. Educational networks were connecting civilizations that had been isolated by Council restrictions. Hive Queen Nala spoke for the first time with genuine humility in her insectoid voice. "What becomes of species like mine? We have based our entire civilization on military strength and territorial expansion. The architect response was surprisingly gentle. Evolution does not require extinction. Your species can learn new purposes. Military discipline can become cooperative coordination. Territorial expansion can become exploration and discovery. The choice to change remains yours. But the tools for domination are no longer available. Counselor Thane stepped forward, his reptilian features showing an expression that his species had not worn in centuries. Uncertainty. And what of the humans? Do they become our new rulers? Captain Webb smiled, the same calm expression he had worn during his original confrontation with the Council. We dissolve the Council entirely, but we do not replace it with human authority. The galaxy will be governed by cooperation between all species, with the architect system serving as teachers rather than rulers. Every civilization gets an equal voice in decisions that affect them. The transformation was already beginning. Throughout the galaxy, the old council chambers were being converted into cooperation centers where hundreds of species could work together as equals. The tribute system that had drained resources from minor worlds was being replaced with voluntary trade, networks that benefited everyone involved. Professor Walsh activated another display showing the new galactic structure taking shape. The architect technology will remain active, but it will not rule over us. It will provide guidance and resources to civilizations that demonstrate peaceful intentions while limiting the expansion capabilities of those that choose aggression. The Age of Empires was ending not through conquest, but through the simple recognition that cooperation produced better results than domination. Species that had been enemies for millennia were discovering that they could accomplish more by working together than they ever had through conflict. As the Cosmic Tribunal concluded, the Architect Collective delivered its final message. The galaxy belongs to all who inhabit it. The age of taking by force is over. The age of growing together begins now. 5 years later, the former Council Fortress had become the Galactic Cooperation Center, where thousands of species worked on projects ranging from stellar engineering to interdimensional exploration. Humanity's role had evolved from liberators to mediators, helping species overcome centuries of mistrust and prejudice. The architect technology continued to reveal new wonders, but only to civilizations that proved they could handle such power responsibly. The galaxy had learned that true strength lay not in the ability to conquer, but in the wisdom to choose cooperation instead. The greatest victory was not won through superior weapons or tactical brilliance, but through the simple recognition that every species deserved the chance to reach their full potential in freedom.